Hey, as we all sprint towards the end of the year, we're bringing back some episodes from the beginning of this year. We'll be back in January with all new episodes, but for now, we're sending you our very best for a happy and healthy holiday.
Oh, I never had a conversation about me playing Latina characters because it wasn't something that was even entertained. I did not look like anybody's Latina.
Hello, Latina to Latina listeners. This is our 50th episode. Thank you for supporting and lifting us up as we make this podcast for you. To celebrate this very special milestone, we spoke to a Latina who at 50 is fearless and standing firmly in her brilliance. Gina Torres has been Hollywood royalty for decades, and we have watched her play some iconic women on television. But no role allowed Gina to embody her strength, her wisdom, and her power like Jessica Pearson did on Suits for more than 5 seasons. For the first time, Gina shares why she left such a beloved show, and her reasons will make you admire and respect her even more. Lucky for us, she's returning to USA Network to star in a spinoff she helped create, Pearson, centered on that complicated powerhouse character.
You're not just starring in Pearson. You were a driving force behind this. You brought the idea to the production company. You're producing the show. What did it feel like to go into a room and not just pitch yourself as the lead, but pitch the idea for a show?
Well, that's exactly what I did. I didn't pitch myself as the lead. I said, I have an idea for the future of Jessica Pearson. As a character, had nothing to do with me trying to get another job. It had everything to do with, I want to tell this story. And I think that's part of what made it interesting. I think that's part of what the powers that be responded to, is this is a story that we can tell beautifully. There's a footprint for it already that exists. There's very successful DNA that we get to pull from. And it's also the opportunity to really get to know this incredibly dynamic woman who I think really piqued the interest of a great many people who watch the show. Right. Like, what makes her tick, really? By the time we get to her, she's just this flawless and possibly fantastic, powerful person. But how does she get there? What does it cost her to get there? Is she still sacrificing? Is she still dealing? Is she wrestling at all with the choices that she made along the way?
I can't imagine why you'd be drawn to that. Why was being attached as a producer important for you?
I wanted to make sure that the story was told properly.
Yeah.
In some ways, I wanted to turn back the clock and fix some things that weren't addressed as Jessica was sort of being trotted out into the world, that were important to me as a woman, because I wanted this version of her to be fully realized. And I didn't need it to be pretty. I didn't need it to be perfect. In fact, I didn't want her to win all the time. I wanted her to fall. I wanted her to engage and fight for her life in a way that we never got to see before. And when you get to be 50, your priorities change and how you see the world changes. And you are looking back as much as you're looking forward. And that's real.
When did you know you wanted to act?
Oh, I just don't ever remember wanting to do anything else. Yeah. I pretended, thought, knew I had other interests, but when I pictured myself, when I sort of projected me forward into a kind of a life, it was always acting. It was always on stage.
And did going to LaGuardia make that more real?
Yeah. LaGuardia let me know. New York schools, in terms of just the sheer population of them, and this was a while now. But our class size back then was like 40.
Right.
So I'm in a school that has, thousands of kids in it who are gifted. And so to be able to distinguish yourself in some way. And so you're also seeing like what's the competition and who really wants it and who's going to pursue it, as opposed to somebody who's just gifted and they just happen to have landed here, who has the stomach for it. It was sort of a microcosm of what was ahead. And I remember having a teacher who said, if somebody sits down and tells you every single horror story that could happen and that you're insane and you still want to do it, then you probably should.
5.5 seasons of Suits. Do you feel like you're basically an attorney at this point?
No, I don't retain any of that. That's like algebra.
I know, I feel the same way. Where I'm like, I took the LSAT. I don't know. Does that
can't
count
help
for
you with that.
anything?
No, can't help you with that. And to be fair, Jessica Pearson, bless her heart, what's so brilliant about her is that she kind of let everybody else do
the actual lawyering.
The actual lawyering.
That's the kind of lawyer I wanted to be.
She's a puppet master. She's genius. Yeah.
So many years, though, spent traveling between Toronto and LA to make that. I mean, how'd you do it? You
start with a prayer that says, thank you, Jesus. I have a job another year.
Right.
Because it sort of begins and it ends right there. You hope as an actor that you can go the distance, that you get a job. And then when you get a job, whether it's a movie, you hope that it's successful. If it's a television show, you hope it has a life and that you like the people that you're working with.
Right.
And so that happens. And you're grateful. So you make it work. There's nothing about having done that show that I regret a single moment of. It's given me so much. It reinforced a work ethic that I had and really tested it. Television is brutal. Mm-hmm. It's brutal on
especially
you.
Especially when you're
brutal
producing as many episodes as you were producing.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't it seem so nice, these shows that have a 6-episode run? It's like, just pop in.
That's like a weekend. It's like, oh, you're working on a weekend? You're doing, that's so nice for you. It doesn't age you at all.
What did that back and forth mean for the rest of your life?
You were talking about family before we started rolling. And I will say that as an actor, we call ourselves gypsies because you have to go where the work is. And there's a kind of agility that instills in you. And I was so profoundly grateful and happy that I was able to give that to my daughter.
Yep.
She has an agility in how she moves through the world and how she sort of accepts change, and it doesn't rock her.
When I would read about this, I imagined that you were the one just going back and forth regularly, but you actually would bring her with you to Toronto.
Oh, yeah. Well, where mama goes, everybody goes.
Yep.
We packed up the house. I took the dogs. I took pictures. They were on the wall because if we were going to be someplace,
you're going to be
for the majority of the year, like 6 to 7 months out of the year, we're going to be home. And it was going to be home. And so we were going to make sure that this choice of mine to be a part of the circus did not affect her until such time that she decided that she wanted to be a part of the circus.
Did it get easier or did it get harder?
It got, it didn't get easier. How's that? It didn't get easier. Did it get harder? It got harder towards the end because my dad was really sick.
And you took care of both your parents.
I took care of my mom. My mom's been gone for a while now, but yeah, my mom, I lost my mom in 97.
And then your dad?
And then my dad 2 years ago. So I knew that I needed to be close. And irony of ironies, I moved him out to LA to watch him and take care of him and make sure that he was good. And then I booked Suits. And then I was, of course. And so I was, so I'd fly back as much as I could and check in on him and all of that. And then his health started failing. And that's when I called the producers and said, I love this show. I love you guys. But I can't. I can't. And I don't think too many people actually know that that's why I left. But I could not be 3,000 miles away during the last however many years I was, left.
That's the problem. You don't know how many years
You
are
just
left.
don't. No, you don't know. You really don't. And thankfully, I was able to be there pretty much the year.
Gina, you were born in New York, raised in Washington Heights in the Bronx, and I feel like Bronx women are everywhere right now. AOC is running laps around Congress. Cardi B is so hot, she just broke a rodeo attendance record. Closer to home are EP Juleka. She's Dominican. She was raised in the Bronx. And whenever she prefaces something with, look, I grew up in the Bronx, I know that whatever is going to come after is gold.
Yes.
How does growing up in the Bronx still shape you?
There's no way that you can enter a room such as a pre-Emmy event or the White House or your dressing room backstage at a Broadway theater and not understand the journey that it takes to get to where you are. It just makes up the fabric of your being.
Is there something that's getting in the way of your happiness or that's preventing you from achieving your goals? I have found that talking with someone can make a big difference, but sometimes the logistics, like finding the right person or the time to connect, make things complicated. BetterHelp Online Counseling connects you with a professional counselor in a safe and private online environment. You can get help on your own time and at your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions, plus chat and text with your therapist. BetterHelp's licensed professional counselors specialize in everything from depression to relationships to complicated family dynamics, self-esteem, grief, you get it. And if you're not happy with your counselor for any reason, you can request a new one at any time. They even have financial aid for those who qualify. Best of all, it's an affordable option. Latina to Latina listeners get 10% off your first month with the discount code LATINA. So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/Latina. Fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor. That's betterhelp.com/Latina.
I like Bronx girls because they seem to be able to cut through BS much quicker than most other people, which as a Jersey girl, I really appreciate. Like, you don't have time for foolishness.
No, there's no time for foolishness. Absolutely not.
Your parents immigrated from Cuba before Castro took over, so same as my grandparents. What made them leave?
They were poor, not educated. And they did not see a path. They did not see a clear path for a future for themselves. They actually met in New York City. My father, who was a very brown Cuban, and this is something that really isn't spoken of very often in the Latin community, is that racism was very prevalent in Cuba, in Puerto Rico, in Latin America. The disease hit us as much as it hit anywhere else. And that was most definitely the case in Cuba, as in the 50s, where he never saw a brown man in a position of power.
Right.
The same could be said of my mother, where her greatest hope was to sort of be married off into a good family and being sponsored by a good family. And that's what she was. She was a personal maid to one of the very, very rich families, political families in Cuba at the time, in Batista's Cuba. So they decided to leave for a better life. And I never forget the story of my dad saying, landing in, he went to Detroit first, and going to the store and seeing a brown man behind the counter, which to him was absolutely a position of power, being trusted to be behind the counter, handling money, in charge of, and how that shaped him. And that's what he was there for. That's what he wanted for himself. And my mom wanted to be a stewardess so that she could travel, and see the world and see the rest of the country and dip into Cuba to see her family, whenever she could. And then the gates closed behind them, shut down tight behind them.
I know. My aunt always talks about that, how they left thinking they'd return. And that day never came.
No.
Did they then consider themselves immigrants or did they consider themselves exiles?
No, they were immigrants. They considered themselves immigrants, absolutely, because they came of their own volition. They had a dream and then a plan, and they created a family. And my father got his citizenship right away. They were very proud, and that's one of the things that I also just loved growing up the way I did. We were of Cuban descent. My father always said, "You are of Cuban descent, but you are American." And that was drilled into us. Now, make no mistake, you walked into our apartment in the Bronx and it was Cuba. I mean, there was music playing, there was Spanish being spoken, there was food being cooked, but we were American.
And because you were the baby of the family, were you the most American?
Probably. Yes. And the fact that my sister lives in the UK and my brother lives in Switzerland, I would say that I could say with a great deal of authority that yes, I'm probably the most American.
12 years old, you go back to Cuba for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember?
I remember landing in Jose Marti Airport and the smell of the diesel fuel and the heat and the humidity. And it was dark. It was nighttime. And we got in the car and went to my grandmother's house. And it was the first time my mother had seen my grandmother in 22 years.
Gosh.
And she saw her, and I just saw heaving. And there weren't a lot of words. There was just tears and heaving. And she just kneeled beside her and grabbed her hand and kissed her hands and kissed her face. And I'm saying this, these people are strangers to me. I mean, I saw them in pictures and maybe rarely heard a voice on the phone. But it was just for a week. And that entire week, I never saw my mother leave my grandmother's side.
Of course. Sorry, now that I'm a mom, can you remember 22 years?
22 years. And it was all of that. And I was like, I'm in Cuba. And they were all so amazed that I spoke English and that they could communicate with me. And they were so full of questions. And I finally, I felt like I belonged somewhere.
Right.
It was my family. I was growing up next to kids that got to go to Puerto Rico for the summer or, Jamaica or wherever it was, or there was a family reunion in Virginia, or I had none of that. So to be in Cuba with my cousin and she looks like me,
mm-hmm.
and my uncle who looks like my dad, and these people who it's just this. It's the first time I understood unconditional love. It's like, you belong to us. Come here. I was like, okay. The toilets don't flush, but this is really cool. It's the best feeling ever. Yeah.
Have you gone back since?
I went back. It's funny because I went back every 4 years. For a couple of years. And the first time we went back, I think the U.S. had boycotted the Olympics, but I got to see them because I was there. And then
Fancy.
4 years later, they boycotted the Olympics. I didn't get to see anything. I think the last time I went, I was 22.
So you haven't been back since Obama opened things up?
No. Yeah. Just timing.
Yep.
I've been a little busy.
You've been busy in Canada.
I've been a little busy.
So then you go on to play Justine Diaz in a Shondaland show, The Catch. What was it like to be a part of Shondaland?
Fantastic. It was. First of all, it's shot in LA, so it was a gift from God.
Yeah.
And then I get to play with Mireille Enos and Peter Krause and like this incredible cast, one more lovely than the next. And in light of everything that was going on in my personal life, it was just sunshine. Everybody cared about the work. They cared about landing those moments, but also like getting home to their families. I was working with grown-ups. And they were incredibly supportive, and they knew about my dad, and they supported that. And it was great. It was great to play this sort of irreverent cop detective.
All sides of the law for Gina Torres.
Absolutely.
Prior to The Catch, you had been on ABC's radar for a long time. You were cast as the lead in an ABC pilot, The Death of Eva Sofia Valdez.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of a handful of roles where you've played an identifiable Latina character. Mm-hmm. What was the first conversation you ever had in Hollywood about you playing Latina characters?
Oh, I never had a conversation about me playing Latina characters because it wasn't something that was even entertained. I did not look like anybody's Latina. And it's so funny. I posted something the other day on Instagram. I was working out on a trampoline and I had a Mark Anthony song playing in the background. I was singing along to Vivir. And I rarely look at the comments, but a friend of mine had commented, and I was responding to that reply, and my eye sort of caught one of the comments that said, "She doesn't look Latina at all, but I'm glad that da da da." And I was like, still, I wasn't mad. I was just like, wow, there's still so far to go. That we're still thinking that Latinas look one way and sound one way. But that's what I was. I certainly wasn't Latina, and I wasn't white enough, and I wasn't black enough. And so what the hell was I going to be? And I was a foot taller than pretty much everybody else in the room. But it was jarring, certainly when I first started in the industry, because I thought, well, I had the opposite effect. I looked at it, I can play anybody.
Right.
I can play any number of people.
Just how I look at you.
It's exactly. Because none of it's a lie. It's, if you know anything about the makeup of any given island in the Caribbean, we encompass the world. And our experience in the world is very much that.
So do you feel embraced by Latino Hollywood?
I do.
Do you feel embraced by Black Hollywood?
I feel embraced by the people who inhabit it.
Right.
I feel embraced by my brethren, right. By, certainly the Latino community in the industry. Absolutely. I feel embraced by the African Americans in the community, because we're all in the same place, wanting to be seen first as a talent, first as a force, and what we're bringing to the table. And that the rest of it should be secondary, and not to the exclusion of, because I'm very proud of where I come from. See, this is that area where it gets really dicey, where you can say something and then it's misconstrued as something else. Not wanting to be seen as a Latin actor first doesn't mean that you're sidelining your ethnicity or your culture, because I can't hide that, nor do I want to.
Right.
But it's just like there's more to me than that. And that's part of what makes me awesome.
It's part of what I can offer you.
Yeah.
For those of us who are Gina Torres fans, this feels like your moment. Does it feel that way to you?
I hope it's not. I hope it's just like the first ray of sunshine that's peeking through the window blinds, because it feels like I got here. Like this is like every choice I made, every door I walked through, every choice that was ever made on my behalf. It's all getting to this. It's all gotten to this real sweet spot where I can now push it all forward and beyond even what I had imagined.
Okay, so what's the plan?
It sounds good, doesn't it?
It does.
I want to keep telling stories. Mm-hmm. I want to continue to produce.
You said something in a New York Times article that I want needle pointed onto a pillow, which is, this is good. Like, I hope you wrote this down, which is, life is about choices, and the grace or lack thereof with which you execute them is a make or break moment in anyone's life.
I said that?
It's good, right?
Wow, that's
It's
good.
It's
Yeah.
perfect. Can you tell me about a time when you lacked or summoned that grace?
Ooh. Somebody just reminded me of one. I was 24 and had auditioned for a Broadway show, and they kept bringing me back and bringing me back, and then didn't hire me, hired a name, and then brought me in to be the understudy. And the name was fired.
Amazing.
But I didn't get the job. And for 2 weeks, I rehearsed with the cast. I was like a set piece. I rehearsed with the cast while they auditioned every single actress in New York City to take that part. And I showed up for work every day. And I made choices. I was in the play. I was a great scene partner with the other actors that I was working with. And this was a Broadway show with a multi-Tony Award-winning director. And it broke my heart every day at lunchtime when I'd see my friends auditioning for the part. And I remember one day I went to the casting director and I said, you haven't seen so-and-so yet, and she's so good, and you should give her a shot. And she looked at me and she said, Gina, how? I said, if it's not mine,
Right.
it should go to someone, that you believe in. At the end of all of that, I got the job.
That's satisfying or unsatisfying? I don't know.
It was incredibly satisfying because here's the thing. There are so many intangibles when you're walking through life. And I said this to somebody one day. It's like you can plan and plan and plan and plan and plan and plan, because we know those people that they just, they plan within an inch of their lives. I said, but you always have to make room for magic. You always have to leave something open. You have to leave your hands and your spirit and your heart open for whatever God, spirit, universe, whatever you believe in, has in store for you. And so in that moment, all I could do was the best that I had in me. And if it wasn't going to be that, it was going to be something else. It happened to be that. But
what a good way to go through life.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to trust. And it's trusting that what you put your heart into and what you believe is your right path is. Because if you don't, then anybody and anything can knock you off of that path and take you somewhere else, and then you're adrift.
Perfect note to end on. Gina, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thanks, as always, for joining us. Latina to Latina is executive produced and owned by Juleka Lantigua Williams and me. Maria Muriel is our producer. Carolina Rodriguez is our sound engineer. Emma Forbes is our assistant producer. We love hearing from you, so email us at hola@latinatolatina.com. And remember to subscribe or follow us on Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And please leave a review. It's one of the quickest ways to help us grow as a community.
You love what?
That you're doing this.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that you're doing this. I mean, we're on fire right now, and so not afraid to speak our minds.
Right.
And I mean, I look at the Latinas that are out there right now that are using their voice and their platform, like, yes!
Yeah, where we all been. No, I know.
Yes!
I know.
And thank you, please.
I know.